Welcome to Unit 4, Learning Target 2, Part 3. This is the last little bit of this learning target where we're going to start putting these things into context. There's a problem that will kind of put us into standard form and one that is going to help us model a slope-intercept form equation. So you can kind of have an example of both. Okay. So here, number 1, you are helping to plan an awards banquet for your school. You need to rent tables to seat 180 people. Tables come in 2 sizes. Small tables seat 4 people. Large tables seat 6 people. First, we need to identify our variables. Write an equation modeling the situation. Find the intercepts of the graph of the equation, and then graph the equation. Be sure to include labels, okay? So here, identifying your variables. So we have an x and we have a y, right? And they should mean 2 different things, okay? Now, for this problem, they're always going to be based on what you don't know. So I know that I have small tables. Sorry about that. Small tables. And they seat 4 people. Large tables seat 6 people, right? And we need to seat a total of 180 people. Okay, now what don't we know? Now looking at this, if I have 180 people to seat, I know how big these tables are, but how many tables do we need? Like, do I need 50 small ones and 100 large ones? Like, how many? And so I don't really know how many tables we have. So that's where our variables come in. So x, we can set to mean the number of, let's say, small tables. It really doesn't matter which one's which, just as long as you know which one you're talking about. That's why we label things and explain what we're saying they are, so that when we go into our equation, we know what we're talking about. We're all talking about the same thing. So then that means y should be the number of large tables. Okay? So then now I can write myself an equation. Now this scenario is set up very nicely for a standard form equation. Standard form, remember, is when I have ax plus by equals c. And so usually standard form equations are very nice for scenarios where you have a certain number of something and then you have to times it by another known number, and then kind of adding them up or finding the total of that equals something, okay? So here, because we're saying x is the number of small tables, I can write that x should be times something. Now, for every table or for every small table I have, that means I'm accommodating 4 people, right? So then those 2 numbers should go together. So if I had 10 tables, that means 10 times 4 means there's 40 people at those tables, right? So then it makes sense to multiply those 2 numbers to each other because they are talking about the same thing, but talking about different parts of the same thing. They're both centralized on the small table, but they're talking different things about the small table, okay? Then this next one, you have y, so the number of large tables, and you can seat 6 people at those large tables, so it would make sense to take 6 times y. So if I had 3 large tables, 3 times 6 people at each of those tables gives me 18. Okay? So kind of using that logic. They're both talking about large tables, but one is saying how many you can fit at a table, and the other is telling me how many of those tables I have. And then overall, this needs to be total, so add it all up, I need to have enough room for 180 people. Okay, so there's my equation. Notice that's in the same kind of setup as our standard form. Okay, so letter C means that I want to find my intercepts. Now this goes back to part 1 where we would plug in 0 in for x. So let's find our y-intercept. So that means taking my equation that I just found, plugging in 0, and then simplifying. So 4 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 6y gets me 6y. And then divide both sides by 6. So then y should equal 30. Okay, and that gives me the ordered pair of 0, 30. Remember, the 0 comes from what we plugged in. The 30 came from what we got out. So now I want to do the same thing for my x-intercept. But here, instead of plugging in 0 in for x, I'm going to plug it in for y. So I plug this value in. 4x plus 6 times 0 should be 0. 4x plus 0 is 4x. And then dividing both sides by 4 gets me 45. Okay? And so same thing, I want an ordered pair. So 45 is what I got out because it's our x. And our y is what we put in, which is 0. Okay? So now I have my 2 ordered pairs that I'm going to graph. So using those points, now notice over here on our graph, my scale usually would be 1, 2, 3. It's not very big, right? It looks like I only go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ugh, not big enough, right? But the nice thing about graphs is that you can change the scale. So let's say we go by 5s. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, right? Same thing on the y value, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. Okay, there's my scale. And you can do that with anything. You can make them go by tens. I picked 5 because 45 and 30 are multiples of 5. So it makes it easier for me to graph later on. Okay, so then here, 0, 30 means that I'm going to go straight up my y-axis. X is 0, so I'm not gonna go this way. Okay, so I'm gonna go up. So 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So there's that ordered pair. I'm going to label like it asks. Now I need to go along the x-axis, but the y value is 0, so I'm not going to go up the y-axis at all. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. And then my label. Okay, and then I draw my line. Okay, and that would be my graph. All right, so let's try the next one. So here, a recording studio charges musicians an initial fee of $50 to record an album. Studio time costs an additional $35 per hour. So same kind of questions. Identify your variables. write an equation modeling the situation. Graph the equation, be sure to label or include labels. Here they ask a new question. Find the cost of recording an album that takes 10 hours of studio time. Okay, so here, same idea. I still want X and Y. And what do they mean? Okay, now the important pieces of this information is that they gave me an initial fee, so like a starting fee of $50. That's what I have to pay to be just in the room to begin with. And then they say that I have to pay another $35 per hour. Right? So every hour that I'm in there, I have to pay more money. Okay, so this one is going to be a little bit different. So what I don't know may not be completely obvious to you, but maybe be helpful to kind of talk about this scenario a little bit. And so this one models a slope-intercept form equation a bit better than a standard form. It's because they give you the values of initial fee. The word initial is trying to represent the thought of starting. So this is what you have to start with. Kind of like in slope-intercept form where we start with the first point, which is the y-intercept. So this initial fee is actually telling you that that's its b value that you're going to have to plug in. Like, oh, well, we already have part of this equation. Nice. Okay. And then the other one kind of gives itself away as well because of the word per. Now, you may not know this, and you may have forgotten this already, but back all the way in Unit 1, we talked about math into words. And there are different words that meant addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And one of the words that represents division is per. Okay, so if this means division, then I could actually write something in division. So $35 per, so per is that division line, hour. And when it says per hour, it means per 1 hour. So it's actually giving you a value there. So if you think about this one, that looks a lot like a fraction, right? Well, what's a fraction in this concept of slope-intercept form? Well, that is the slope. That's your m. Okay? So they're actually telling you 35 is your slope because of the word per. Now I get to fill in the rest of my stuff, y and x. Okay, so now go back to identifying what x and y represent. Okay, so if $35 is like our slope, so the amount that I have to pay per hour, what don't I know about that thought? Okay, what else do I need to know to be able to say, okay, well, I've spent this much time in the studio recording an album, I have to pay you this amount of money. How could I figure that out? Well, I need to know how long I've been in there, right? I don't know how much time I've spent. So X is actually telling you the number of hours that you've been in that room, okay? Because the number of hours, so if you spent 5 hours recording an album one day, then that means 5 times 35 plus the 50 is what you're going to get. Now, that's like the end game, right? We're supposed to be paying for this recording studio at the end. So I eventually want to know what I owe that person so I can pay him, so I don't get like taken to jail or anything, or arrested or given a fee or sued or any of that awful stuff. So here, y is actually telling you the total cost. Okay? And so in slope-intercept forms, your X variable is going to be the number of something, whatever you're counting or keeping track of that you don't initially know but could be different at any point in time or in any scenario. That is your X. So it's always a number of. Y is always going to be a total. So total cost, total number of something, total profit, even if you're making money on whatever you're talking about. Okay, so that's kind of how you go about understanding those two things. So the equation and the variables are conjoined to each other. They should be able to talk to one another and make sense when you plug them in. Okay, so now I want to be able to graph. Well, we practiced this in the last video for part 2. So I want to graph my y-intercept first, right? So that gives me the value or the ordered pair of 0, 50, right? So same thing here. Looks like my graph is not really set up for 50 or anything else. But because you have a 35 here, that means you have to go up 35. So that's a lot. So maybe we should go by 25s. So 25, 50, okay, 75, 100, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to say this is 150, this is 200. That's probably good for right now, okay? And on the other side, now your scales can actually be two different things as well. So this is the cost, okay? This is the number of hours. It wouldn't really make sense to be talking about hours in the sense of like 50, 25. I know it takes a while to do recording an album because I surely can't do it, but it doesn't take for like forever. So I don't want it to be too big of a number. So how about we go by like 2? So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on and so forth. Okay, that kind of makes it a little easier. So now I want to graph this first ordered pair. So 50, 0, 50 would be right there. And label it. Okay, and then now I want to go up 35 to 1. Now this is going to be a little weird. So 35 up and 1 to the right. Okay, so 35 up gets you to about right here, and then that gets you somewhere in the middle. Now that's not a fun point. Like that's kind of hard because it doesn't actually land on a line. And sometimes it's not always going to. That's fine. So let's do it again. So 35 up again. So that would be like starting at 0, 50 and going up 70. But then I also have to go to the right too. Okay, so maybe that would be better. So up 70 would get me to 120, which is right about there. Okay, so then I can at least get on a line here, but it's not great. So let's do it again. So 35 up puts us at, that'd be 155, comma 1. So it's about right here. Okay, so we'll mark that one. Okay, and then the same thing, 35, another 35 up would be at 180. Unfortunately, we don't have very good points, but that's okay. So we can make our line from there. Okay, so then now it says find the cost of recording an album that takes 10 hours of studio time. Okay, now this last little part is giving you a value and asking you to find the other. Okay, and this is something you've done actually before in the last unit when you changed the formula to help you out. So if you wrote y equals 35x plus 50, okay, think about what 10 hours means. Do you know what variable that would go to? Okay, what is its label? Hours. Where have I put hours before? Ooh, it looks like if I'm looking at my variables, I said hours was with X. And this is a number of hours, right? So this must mean X. So then that would suggest that if this is 10 hours and it goes with X, I would put it in for X to help me solve. So then now Y is going to equal 35 times 10 plus 50. And so 35 times 10 is 350. And then adding those two is going to equal 400. So it's going to cost you $400 to spend 10 hours in the studio. So hopefully that makes sense. Make sure you refer back to this video when you need help, or reach out and ask questions if something doesn't make sense. Okay? Take care.